Thanks for tuning into Scalebound Games. We'd love to take you behind the scenes on why we love role-playing games, and why we're focusing all of our efforts on making the best one for you we can. Before we get too far into it, I'd like to remind you that we're a growing YouTube channel. Every like, comment, and subscribe helps us break free from the algorithm and find more friends to play games with. Alright, for many of you, you may have never played a physical role-playing game. Or if you have, the most intense one that you've done is like being a bad guy or a good guy in Cops and Robbers. And that is playing a role in a game. You know, tabletop role-playing games don't fall far from that tree. Maybe you've had the experience of playing with your childhood friends where you thought you had won. You came up with a laser blaster that was going to shoot them down, or a spell to sink their ship. But they said, "Nuh-uh, I have a cloak of invisibility that makes me avoid ship sinking spells." It probably didn't feel all that fair or justified. And as adults especially, we seek fairness and justice in the games we play. God knows the world doesn't have enough of it on its own. Role-playing games are a lot like the games that you played as kids. Their imagination and creativity and cleverness and storytelling, but they also have fairness and a degree of predictability. To that end, they take your imagination and your friend's imagination and a referee's imagination, and they throw them all into a blender. You all put your ideas forth for consideration, and the referee takes the most sensible one for the world you're playing in and tests it. What does a test look like? Well, in most games, including ours, it involves rolling one or more dice based on how good your character is at the task they're trying to complete. In the most popular tabletop role-playing game, Dungeons & Dragons, you take a 20-sided die, and you roll it and add an ability score modifier to it, maybe like a +3 or subtract a -1, depending on how good or bad your character is. Once those two numbers are added together, it's compared to a difficulty class, which is a number that the game master decides to represent how hard a task is. Are you picking a very simple lock, or are you trying to convince a king to take up arms and fight by your side? Not everything you do is equally challenging. If you tie or beat that difficulty class, you succeed at what you want to do. Otherwise, you fail. There are consequences. For high wins, you still have a greater chance at success based on your stats, just like D&D. But instead of rolling one die, we build what's called a dice pool. The better your stat is, the more dice you roll at once. You can learn a little bit more about that in the video that we put out last week about why you want to check out our game. Because our game favors success over failure, the more dice you roll, the better a chance at an outcome that matches what you envisioned when you took the action. You know, if you're just totally unfamiliar with this world, we can talk about it from the perspective of like a video game too, you know? I'm sure you've played or know someone who's played something like Skyrim or Cyberpunk 2077. These are landmark games that offer you totally different lives than you could ever imagine in your current world. You'll meet fantastic characters, solve world-changing puzzles, and discover threads of stories that spread to the far corners of the worlds their designers planned and programmed for you. That's the key. They're limited. Even a game like Cyberpunk that was developed for what felt like, 10 years by like 1,000 people, it's held back by a large number of factors. What story beats did the writers working on the game think up before they shipped them over to the programmers? Of those, what were the programmers able to actually even code into the engine that they were working with? Which ones broke in Q&A or weren't fun in testing or just had to be cut for time? How did the limitations of the consoles that they were designed for and their controllers and the screens that you play the game on determine what stories you could participate in while you ran around Night City? It's no mystery. Especially at launch, a lot of people felt like the worlds in the games that we were talking about were really broad but shallow. There was a lot to do, but the choices that you made didn't really matter all that much. For example, in Skyrim, you can't just go and kill like the story-crucial NPCs. The game won't let you. And in games like Cyberpunk, spoilers, you can't always save your favorite characters either. Sorry, Jackie, I really wish we could have. You're limited by the world that was delivered to you when you purchased the game, and sure, it can be updated based on player feedback and expanded in DLCs, but it was still someone else's story that you picked a path or two in to experience. In a tabletop role-playing game, it's still the framework of a story that someone has come up with. You still have an adventure. You're going to set out to get the treasure, or defeat the big bad evil guy. But whether the adventure designer or your GM came up with it, The thing that's different than like a video game is that every path isn't already written and programmed and tested and tweaked. Each one gets willed into existence as you make it. Let's go back to the example of Cyberpunk 2077. Maybe, if you were telling that story, you'd be willing to sacrifice something to let Jackie live. In the video game, that's literally impossible. It's written that he must die, and so he must. But if you were telling that story in a tabletop game, your GM might let you take like a major consequence, you know? Lose a limb, lose your memory, let your character die, or make a really challenging roll in order to let your favorite character live. So Jackie comes and you know he's going to get shot. GM telegraphs this to you and you say, look, I'm willing to jump in front of him and take a bullet to the arm if it means that he gets to live for just a little bit longer so I can say my goodbyes. And the GM doesn't have to do everything a player says, but if they think that they can make it work in the context of the story, they have the freedom to do that, unlike a video game or a book or a movie. Even the smaller, less consequential choices are built collaboratively too, you and your friends' ideas influencing the future of the world you play in. Plus, there's the unpredictability of the dice. Maybe you and the GM think it's a cool idea if you pick a lock, but your character isn't great at it. So like in High Winds, maybe they only have like a 1 in burglary, so you only get to roll 2 d6s. Could be a really nasty roll. Maybe you roll 2 1s. That's a -2, and that's just not going to succeed. Unfortunately, you fail. But fortunately for everyone else at the table and the world, the story goes on. Role-playing games persist. So what if you don't pick the lock? Maybe the snap of the lockpick in its tumblers alerts a guard waiting on the other side who now starts approaching the door. As at table, the tension rises as you hear each heavy step fall, the rubber of the sole of the boot striking tile. So what do you do now? Well, that's the exciting thing, is you get to solve another puzzle with your friends that changes the future of the story. And after that one, something else is going to happen. After that, something else. And that can be intimidating, I get it. Coming up with the solution to every story beat in not just your mind, but trying to put yourself in the mind of what your character would do is daunting, especially if you've never done it before. And that's okay too. The cool thing about games like ours is you're not alone. You have the support of a GM and your party that keep things flowing. Just because your character didn't hit their beat doesn't mean someone else won't get the chance to shine. Maybe one of your friends is really diplomatic or deceitful and can smooth talk their way out of the guard capturing you when he opens up the door. Or someone great with guns just blows them clean off their feet. That's the beauty of collaborative storytelling. You don't always have to be the hero, and you don't always have to have the answer. Sharing the spotlight isn't everyone's favorite activity, though. Well, I'm here to convince you to at least check out our Kickstarter, which is linked below. There's a whole world of other games out there for you. Maybe you want to tell your own story, or just like one with a friend, but you don't really have like someone who's comfortable GMing or know where to start. You could check out a cool journaling game or a card-based RPG. Like one that I was looking at this week is called Stranded in Space, and it's by an upcoming designer named Quinn Beck. It's their first game, and they just released it like a month ago. It's really cool because it's 2 players, no GM, so you don't need a huge group of people that you're fighting with scheduling with and things like that. And instead of fighting monsters or seeking treasure, you're just 2 people alone on a ship that start out not really liking each other, and over the course of the game learn to find ways to appreciate each other's company and maybe even fall in love. So I think that there's like this misconception that like role-playing games are just picking up swords and cutting down goblins and stuff like that. But I'm here to tell you that's not what it all is. I promise. And maybe like sci-fi and fantasy aren't really your thing at all, or happy endings never spoke to you. That's cool too. There are other games out there like Inevitable. This is a deadly Western legend RPG. So the world is at the cusp of apocalypse, and it will end, and your characters will fail to stop it. And that's all preordained. But it's all about telling a cool story and making your mark on the world between when you start playing and when that apocalypse comes. Our game is a little more hopeful. It is a heroic game, and while you can tell stories about the end of the world, we like to think that you're changing and making a better future for the people who are going to come after. And it is a rules-light game, so there is a little bit of math. There are some dice, but it's not too complicated. There are less feats or features or things like that to worry about. Our character sheet's a little more brief and straightforward, because we like the idea of us being your first role-playing game if you've never dabbled in the hobby. Or maybe one that you go back to when you want to focus on telling a cool story about sky pirates that you just had kicking around in your head and couldn't really tell in another system or in another world. For us, having no modifiers, those are the numbers that we talked about earlier that you add or subtract from your dice roll, help facilitate that. We also don't want busy work getting in the way of your path to glory. And having low difficulty classes, so that's the number that you have to meet or beat to succeed, means that you're often doing what you want, which is really cool. If you have a cool idea for a story beat, we generally want you to be able to express that. Some people like feeling like they're beating the game. They come up with broken or meta builds. If you have friends that play Pathfinder or a crunchy game like Lancer, you may have heard about this. And we like theory crafting and feeling powerful too. There are going to be people who certainly strap on a boatload of equipment to their ship and have an exit in every situation. But we do think limitations breed creativity as well. So the stories that you come up with when you're a flawed and realistic character, and yes, even the robot buddy that mans your sails is realistic in their desires and motivations, when those butt up against the challenge of a piratey world, they're much more interesting than an unstoppable and unfeeling force of nature just blasting down everything in its path without a challenge. Ultimately, every system out there offers something a little different to people who are looking to play or tell games or stories at their table. We're not going to try to pretend to be the perfect game for every player. Such a thing really doesn't exist, I promise you. Even the most popular ones have their shortcomings in some areas as well. What we do think we are is a great engine for telling high-stakes narrative adventures without bogging you down in endless reams of paper or hours of character creation. You can be who you want to be, in a world you want to see, with friends you want to be with. And for us, that's the best possible way you could spend your time. If you've ever caught yourself yelling at your TV before, shouting at the pages of your book, or tossing your controller because you felt like the characters got it all wrong, then come along. Grab a cutlass, don a pirate hat, and set sail with us this fall when we go to Kickstarter, so we can work to build the perfect vessel for you to tell your story in 2026.